everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for really quick. So it isn't very often that I talk meaningful college basketball games in July. And to be blunt, I was not planning on talking about it today. But a funny thing happened. So there is currently an international event going on called the Global Jam right now that's taking place in Toronto. It's an under-23 event where most teams, most countries send an under-23 national team. Canada's got one there, Germany's got one there, etc. Well, the United States, for whatever reason, has decided rather than put together a team with a bunch of players from a bunch of different spots, they're just going to send a college team to represent the U.S. Last year it was Baylor, this year it was Kentucky. And Kentucky, representing the U.S. in this tournament, played their opener on Wednesday afternoon. As I said, did not think I would talk about it because this is a tough tournament, international teams, older players. Baylor was actually the U.S. representative last year and went 1-4 in this event. Thought Kentucky might struggle. Remember, this is a team. What is it? 7 true freshmen on this roster, plus 2 returnees who barely played. Antonio Reeves, the one veteran that played significant minutes last year, and then Trey Mitchell, the forward who just transferred in from West Virginia a few weeks ago. So young team, international tournament, 7 freshmen on this roster. Of course, one of them is hurt right now, Aaron Bradshaw. Didn't know what to expect from Kentucky, but decided to tune in and check it out anyway. Well, what I can say is I was genuinely shocked at how good Kentucky, representing the U.S. in this tournament, looked as they took care of business 81-73 against Germany in the opener. 8-point differential, not indicative of how good Kentucky looked for most of this game and how one-sided this game was. And so I do want to react a little bit. I do want to talk about what I saw, and I will do it with the caveat by saying it's July 12th, maybe July 13th as you listen to this, and a lot's going to change between now and March, okay? Oh, by the way, Kentucky plays on Thursday again, so by the time you listen to this, who knows what's going to happen. But all I can do is react to what I know right now. And let me give a spade a spade. Let me call a spade a spade. Let me give credit where it's due. Kentucky looked a lot better than I thought. And I'm genuinely excited to break down this game as they take care of business against Germany. The first thing that stood out about this Kentucky team is pretty straightforward. This is just a much more athletic, fast-paced team than they've had over the last couple years. And if you go back and if you've watched Kentucky basketball, you know what Kentucky's been about over the last 2-3 years. Well, really the last 2 years. It's been about Oscar Tshiebwe. And I love Oscar Tshiebwe. I think he was great for Kentucky, National Player of the Year 2022. And I think he's been great for college basketball. I'm glad that we got another year of him this past year. But at the same time, I don't think I realized how much you have to adjust for Oscar Tshiebwe when he's on your roster until he wasn't there on Wednesday afternoon. Great player, great kid, wish him nothing but the best. But if you watch this Kentucky team, it was much more fast breaks, much more up and down, much more play above the rim defensively, couple alley-oops, three-quarter court traps on defense. It just looks like a completely different team. And to be blunt, you know what it looks like? An early era John Calipari team. I remember watching Alabama this past year, and I remember saying, Alabama looks more like those old school Calipari Kentucky teams of 2010, 2011, 12, 13, 14 than Kentucky does. Well, this team is young, but they're athletic, they're skilled, they play hard. And I think I can't guarantee what they're going to win and lose. They're going to be more fun to watch. It's going to be a much more aesthetically pleasing team to watch going forward. Beyond that, the second biggest takeaway, this team's hungry, man. Like they competed so hard on both ends of the court. They played together, which is kind of incredible considering that they've only had 10, 12 practices together as a group, if that, as they've added new players this spring. I thought they looked really good. And that was kind of another interesting thought that I had. I understand that college basketball in 2023 is an older person's sport. I understand that in a perfect world, you want to get old, stay old, all that. But what I'll also say is something that has always kind of stuck with me, which is that sometimes younger can be better from this perspective. You get a bunch of older players, guys that have had success at the college level, whether it's as a transfer or at the current school. Sometimes guys are set in their ways. Sometimes they think they can cut corners. Sometimes they think they don't have to do what the coach is telling them to. When you get a young team with a bunch of dudes with a chip on their shoulder, and more importantly, guys that have something to prove, then you get what we saw on Wednesday with Kentucky, where guys are flying all over the floor. Guys are diving on the floor, defending, like I said, trapping in the corner, three-quarters court. There was just a youthful energy to this Kentucky team that I really enjoyed watching on Wednesday, again, knowing that there's a lot more games to be played in this tournament before we even get to November, December, January. In terms of individual players, a couple things stood out. One, Kentucky's last edition may have been the most important. So Trey Mitchell, as I said, West Virginia transfer, was the kid we talked about a few weeks ago, was at West Virginia, was happy at West Virginia, but obviously the Bob Huggins situation happened and decided to look around. He ends up committing to Kentucky, and boy, oh boy, did Kentucky need him. So first of all, it's worth noting, Kentucky has two big guys that are hurt. Aaron Bradshaw hurt his foot a few weeks ago. We talked about it on the show. And then, oh, by the way, Ugonna Onyenso really was supposed to be the starting center. He got hurt in practice going into this event. I think it was an ankle. And so this kid, Trey Mitchell, is very important. 6'8", 6'9", can play the 4 when needed, but played the 5 on Wednesday. And Kentucky didn't miss a beat. I thought they were better with him as a 5 than maybe with him potentially as a 4. Handled the boards, but then more importantly, showed a lot of versatility on offense, the stuff that we talked about on this show when he committed. 20 points, 3 3-pointers, and it was really 2 3-pointers late or early in the second half, that really kind of opened things up and really gave Kentucky the lead and gave him confidence. Speaking of confidence, good to see Antonio Reeves back. That's, of course, the player entered the NBA draft, removed his name from the draft. There was a short amount of time where no one was sure, was he going to come back to Kentucky? Was he going to try to transfer? Well, he comes back and he looks like the Antonio Reeves that we saw late last season for Kentucky, 24 points against Team USA. I think what's interesting about that is a couple things. One, it's just a carryover from what we saw last year. This was a guy that, as I said, when he came back, was one of the best guards in college basketball late in the year. 37 points at Arkansas late in the year. 22 points in the SEC tournament against Vandy. 22 points against Providence in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. And what's especially interesting to me about his performance on Wednesday is he's the only guy that Germany really had a scouting report on. They knew what he did well. They knew what he didn't do well, how to limit him, and he still goes for 24. In terms of the freshman, listen, I think it goes without saying, DJ Wagner was awesome. And it's funny, and we've talked about this, but I do think there's been a little bit of a cool revisionist history thing on DJ Wagner, where it feels like he's gone from properly rated to maybe even a little bit underrated. And to me, the reason why is pretty straightforward. He's basically been deemed, this is, of course, 5-star son of DeJuan Wagner. I think any Kentucky fan listening knows, but for a non-Kentucky fan, he's basically been the number 1 high school player in this class, essentially since they started ranking the class of 2023. And so I think what happened was evaluators kind of got tired of watching him. He didn't have the best senior year, wasn't perfect. And it's I think there was this thing of maybe he's been overrated all along. No, he's been awesome all along. I think everybody just got tired of talking about him. Finishes as a top 5 prospect, but he ends up being the MVP of the McDonald's All-American game. He was awesome on whatever it was, Wednesday afternoon. I keep wanting to say Thursday, Saturday. It was Wednesday. Finishes with 16.6 assists. He was phenomenal. 3-point shooting, most importantly, can get to the rim, something we have talked about with Kentucky basketball. For this whole thing to go, you need a guard that can make plays off the dribble. He can do that. And then in terms of everybody else, listen, I thought Reed Sheppard, the freshman from Kentucky, showed flashes, offense, defense, both ends of the court, hustle, smart basketball. There's a pretty cool play where there was 1 second left on the shot clock with an out-of-bounds play, and he finds a guy wide open for an alley-oop. Rob Dillingham, freshman point guard, little bit out of control at certain points, but that was what was expected. I think he's going to provide instant offense off the bench. And then credit where it's due. Adou Thiero was a freshman last year, and I think he was kind of miscast as a guard. And because there were so many injuries, had to kind of play point guard at various points. I just bring it up to say he played more of a forward, a 3-4 type spot on Wednesday afternoon. He looked awesome. Played above the rim, couple sick blocks at the rim, shot blocking, energy, hustle, rebounding. That's the exact kind of guy that this specific team needs. And so you look at this team. I'm sorry. Again, maybe they lose by 40 on Thursday and I get embarrassed in the comment section on YouTube. You guys are just laughing at me. But when I look at this team and I look at what I just saw, think about all the things that didn't go right in this game. Again, first of all, Kentucky's playing an international, a national team from Germany, a bunch of older players that are playing professional. They're without their two biggest guys, including one who's a future lottery pick in Aaron Bradshaw. Justin Edwards, who I barely mentioned, depending on what recruiting service, some think he was the #1 high school player in America this past year. He played okay, but he wasn't unbelievable in his first appearance in a Kentucky uniform. Plus, you're playing in an international tournament, international ball, international rules, and Kentucky still wins by 8. So I don't want to oversell it. But when I look at what I just saw, I think it was a great opener for Kentucky. And I'll be blunt. I can't wait to watch this team again on Thursday, this tournament, and going forward. Because I've been a guy. What did I say all offseason? Now listen. I gotta do where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong right here, right now. Because I was critical early in the offseason, but I also said I felt like there was too much negativity around this team once the roster came together with Trey Mitchell and Antonio Reeves. Because Kentucky's best teams have always been freshman-led, guard-led, NBA guard-led, and that's exactly what this team is. Kentucky plays again on Thursday, so we'll find out. Was this a one-off? Is it a continuation? But I am very excited to watch this team keep playing. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor. Make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube channel. Also, new episodes of the Aaron Torres Podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And yes, on Friday's show, we will be reacting to both Kentucky games.